Um, Everyone who's sitting here is a very hard act to follow, not just them, but Anne as well. So I think that the first thing I want to say is we've, as both Homa and James have said, we've met a number of times, and we've put a lot of work into preparing for this session. And the amount of effort that Aban and Keki have put into preparing us times 10, because they've prepared everyone else at the Congress, has just been monumental. So I just want to say a quick thank you. And not just work, but really thoughtful care, I think. It just has stood out to me so much during the year that we've been preparing for this. And there are so many commonalities and so many differences amongst us that every time I hear these stories again, and I've heard them many times now, I'm struck by the things that bind us together and the things that make us so very different from each other. So please bear with me, because I also have different threads that I'm trying to pull together. Hopefully this will all make sense at the end. So my story is, like I said, similar and different. I live in suburban New Jersey, where James grew up, and my family is here, my husband and my 2 kids, and we are a Zoroastrian family. My husband is Jewish, and I'm Zoroastrian. I grew up in Karachi, and we've made the conscious decision to raise our children in both faiths and to have a multi-faith family. But this is very different from how I grew up. So I grew up in Karachi. My parents were both very traditional Parsi Zoroastrians, and I would say that they were both pretty traditional Orthodox Parsis, and their view of Zoroastrianism was much more about ritual and dogma than I think mine is today. And so growing up, my mother was very traditional, and she tried to infuse that traditional sense into my brother and me. It didn't work. So one of the bright spots in my childhood was that my parents sent us to Zoroastrian religious school. It was called, in Pakistan when I was a child, the weekend was Friday and Saturday, because Friday is the Muslim Sabbath. So our religious school was called the Friday School for Little Zartushtis. I know a lot of you in the audience, so I think some of you in the audience who are from Karachi are also proud graduates of the Friday School. And our teachers were wonderful, and they really infused in us a sense of what Zoroastrianism is without necessarily labeling things. So I grew up with a strong sense that creating happiness in the world was an obligation, and also a joy. And I grew up with a strong sense that all of us have been gifted with this vahumana, and we must use it. And it's interesting hearing you speak. I think, you talk about the good mind as sort of centering you, and I have sort of taken a different view of the good mind, which is that it imposes on us an obligation to really grapple with things, to question, and to come to our own conclusions, because Zarathustra's message is that we all have this gift of making sure that we don't follow blindly, that we question and we come to our own conclusions. When we follow people, we take a path around the difficulties because we're simply following the person in front of us. But when we actually take in the difficulty and grapple with it and struggle, we go through it and come out the other side on our own path. And so from a young age, I think this was just sort of infused in me because of the wonderful teachings of Arnavazdin Shah and her crew at the Friday School. And so I was this thorn in my mother's very traditional side because I was always questioning. And we would have these theoretical debates that my mother actually indulged me in, which in hindsight seems ridiculous. But you know, the conversation would start.
Ten people, mics are not working, panelist mics are not working.